So, Mr. President, if there is objection, and I note the senator from Kentucky on the floor, I will say before I read this, if there is objection, you are achieving the objectives of Vladimir Putin. You're achieving the objectives of trying to dismember this small country that has already been the subject of attempted coup. I have no idea why anyone would object to this, except that I will say, if they object, they are now carrying out the desires and ambitions of Vladimir Putin, and I do not say that lightly. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that at a time to be determined by the Majority Leader in consultation with the Democratic Leader, the Senate proceed to executive session to consider calendar number 1, Montenegro Treaty Document 114-12, that the treaty be considered as having advanced through the various parliamentary stages up to and including the presentation of the resolution of ratification, that any committee declarations be agreed to as applicable, that there be no amendments in order to the treaty or the resolution of ratification, that there be 2 hours for debate, equally divided in the usual form. Upon the use of yielding back of time, the Senate proceed to vote on the resolution, that any statements be printed in the record as if read, that if the resolution of ratification is agreed to, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, that if the resolution is not agreed to, the treaty will be returned to the calendar, and that there be no motions or point of order in order, and a motion to reconsider, and then the Senate then resume legislative session.
Mr. President? Senator from Kentucky.
I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, I note the senator from Kentucky leaving the floor without justification or any rationale for the action that he has just taken. That is really remarkable. That a senator blocking a treaty that is supported by the overwhelming number, perhaps 98 at least, of his colleagues, would come to the floor and object and walk away. And walk away. The only conclusion you can draw when he walks away is he has no argument to be made. He has no justification for his objection to having a small nation be part of NATO that is under assault from the Russians. So I repeat again, the senator from Kentucky is now working for Vladimir Putin.
You want to go to Capitol Hill? Senator from Kentucky, member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Rand Paul. Senator, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
We are going to get to health care in just a moment, but first want to get your reaction to the words Senator John McCain had for you from the Senate floor yesterday. Let's listen.
I note the senator from Kentucky leaving the floor without justification or any rationale for the action that he has just taken. That is really remarkable. That a senator blocking a treaty that is supported by the overwhelming number, perhaps 98 at least, of his colleagues, would come to the floor and object and walk away. And walk away. The only conclusion you can draw when he walks away is he has no argument to be made. He has no justification for his objection to having a small nation be part of NATO that is under assault from the Russians. So I repeat again, the senator from Kentucky is now working for Vladimir Putin.
So, Senator, a little context around that. The vote was around putting Montenegro into NATO. What's your reaction to Senator McCain's characterization of your objection?
Well, you know, I think he makes a really, really strong case, you know, for term limits. I think maybe he's past his prime. I think maybe he's gotten a little bit unhinged. I do think that when we talk about NATO, there can be a rational discussion about the pros and cons of expanding it. We currently have combat troops in about 6 nations. We have troops actively just stationed in probably a couple dozen others. We have a $20 trillion debt. And one of my favorite articles of the last couple of years was one that talked about the angry McCains. And if we put active troops and got involved in combat where McCain wants us to be, they put a little angry McCain on the globe, on the map, and it's virtually everywhere. So his foreign policy is something that would greatly endanger the United States, greatly overextend us. And there has to be the thought whether or not it's in our national interest to pledge to get involved with war if Montenegro has an altercation with anyone. There's also another argument, is that when you ask the people of Montenegro, only about 40% or slightly less are actually in favor of this. They are close to Russia. They're close to being sort of like Ukraine in the transition from Europe to Asia. Perhaps it would be good to be like Switzerland and be more neutral and trade with both. So there's a lot of considerations, but to call someone somehow an enemy of the state or a traitor might be considered by most reasonable people to be a little over the top.
Well, Senator,